Bots, battles, and blur. I already hate 2XKO and have not played it yet. Bob's, Babbles, and Blurbs. Just a quick rant. And, sometimes on this channel I will talk about stuff like video games and things like that, things that I grew up on. So I'll go ahead and break the ice for you guys on this channel. And the first game I'm going to talk about is 2XKO, formerly known as Project L, formerly known as Rising Thunder, formerly known as wah, 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 wah. Hey, I already do not like the game and I have not played it yet. This is coming from a someone who played the original Street Fighters, and I cannot complain at the idea of new fighting games arriving on the scene. Period. I've always been kind of privy to how the fighting game community works, how they operate. I just don't participate in stuff like tournaments, either online or offline, for my own reasons. And some of that has to do with just simply not necessarily wanting to make myself have to be that desperately competitive in order to enjoy the game and the process of learning a game. As a matter of fact, the idea of so many newer games that have come out and just immediately going into tournaments, that in and of itself has actually turned me off of learning certain fighting games, because all I have to do from that point on is just look at the match footage, and I pretty much satisfy my appetite for how the game looks, for the mechanics, the best characters, nice combos, the best players, and so on and so forth. It kind of, it doesn't hit the same way as back in the day when you had Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the arcade machine with the funny purple, logo and stuff, and you're like, what is this? And you're like, wait, Ryu can do a hurricane kick in the midair. And you realize all of your previous training now you have to add something to it, and it's not an easy thing to do. That it wasn't on day one. People weren't hitting jump fierce air hurricane kick combos on day one of Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It took months of labbing, of discovering fundamentals, of it was such an experience. I was in my grade school days during that time, and I can remember waking up, and even though I had my school obligations, one of the first things on my mind was, oh, I can't wait to get to that arcade cabinet. I want to try this. My favorite characters, Ken, and let me see who else. I use Zangief a lot too, because his reach for his grab, his spinning pile driver, became crazy in Super Turbo to me, and I was eating people up because they didn't think that I knew how to use him. So Ken and Zangief, those were my characters back in those days. And if I ever go back to playing like on Fightcade, those will be the characters that you most likely would see me use, or even Chun-Li also, because I liked her fireball. But I digress. It took so much effort to get good at those games. I hope you guys get what I'm saying, and I hope I'm not necessarily ranting too long and trying to get this point across. But with 2XKO, I have to admire, the process of, ingenuity. You want to make something new, something that hasn't been done before, questionable in and of itself. The idea of using League of Legends characters, I'll be honest, I've never been real big on League of Legends or games in that format, that style, that genre, just because I don't really have any good reason why. But I respect, games that, catch people's attention and are that are not necessarily offensive in too many ways. But, the game looks good. It has a nice polish to it compared to its first early days and impressions. And, and I'm like, okay, all right, so where's the meat and potatoes to it? And, and I'm looking at okay, just for transparency, the beta for the game was officially released yesterday, September 9th, 2025, a 999 day. And I'm sure that the people at the devs and other people behind the scenes wanted to use that day as kind of like, the energy of those spiritual numbers. It's a 999 day, so hopefully they've reached some kind of level of completion and they know what direction they want to take the game. But to me, I'm kind of lost on the ease of use factor. Like it takes like that there is no ease of use factor when it comes to certain games like first person shooters, when it comes to the racing simulations. Granted, Mario Kart will let you it'll auto steer and auto drive before you hit the throttle, but that's for the kids. That's not necessarily for adults. As an adult and as somebody who's meant to learn especially the fundamentals, it should be a process to get as good as possible, in order to actually enjoy the rewards of what you putting in, low forward, super fireball. There is something satisfying about hitting that, rather than, I hit this button and then I hit this other button and all of this stuff happened on the screen, all of this flashy stuff, and I won. Like, there's really it doesn't look like there's enough complexity to the actual art form in 2XKO compared to Dragon Ball FighterZ. Because even though Dragon Ball FighterZ was also like a light, medium, heavy, special button, they still had quarter circle motions. It still required a whole lot of fundamental, just having to understand how that in and of itself, those fundamentals, those quarter circle forward, especially fundamentals, all of that shined still in that game. And that's one of the things that still make Dragon Ball FighterZ a classic game and a one-of-a-kind game. So even though I never got into it, because like I said, my earlier statement about the whole tournament scene and just pretty much being satisfied with watching people who took the games more to heart than I did, just to purchase, and I'm just adding them to the collection and saying to myself, I'll learn them later, but I'll have plenty of footage to go back on. I'll have hours of footage, depending on what game I choose to study, to go back, and I can look on YouTube and TikToks and all that, and I can find all kinds of stuff just on that one character that people didn't did the hard work to discover. So, but with 2XKO, if the goal is to bring more players in, then I think one of the main goals should also be to introduce them to the original fundamentals that make fighting games what they are. And I need to apologize for taking this long to even get to that statement, because that's what I really wanted to say, is that the lack of the traditional motions inside of 2XKO has already turned me off from the game. And I'll give that actually made me respect Street Fighter 6 that much more, because when I heard that Street Fighter 6 was going to include a modern control scheme, I kind of I squinted side-eyed, but hey, people still, I respect the fact that the original input system is called Classic. So that means that there's almost a unannounced class system within the game, even though there are a lot of pro players that shine using the modern system. And the modern system is not necessarily a it is not a not complex system. It's actually a very complex system inside of Street Fighter 6. So I give Capcom credit on at least having a skill bar even within the modern control scheme system in Street Fighter 6, where you just can't jump in there and think you're just pushing buttons and just pulling off level 3 critical arts and stuff, But still, with 2XKO, the devs, I hope somebody just tells one of them, just link the video and tell them I don't mind that they might have a little qualms with how I'm saying this, but hey, you need to make the game appealing to the old heads like me and offer us a classic control scheme system that will make the game feel a little bit more rewarding to kind of grind out and play, because I don't want to miss out on that muscle memory per se, just for the sake of getting good at a game. That to me is not getting good by lowering the skill level that has taken me decades to get used to. That is not doing me any favors. I understand for the newer audience, but for a person like me and those who relate to what I'm saying, I like the complexity and the fundamentals of old school versus the so-called new school. Bring the new players in, but also you need to let them new players come in who learn. They say, oh, it's so easy to play. Give them the opportunity to learn the fundamentals, so they can choose to go back and forth as they please. They might choose to stay with the one button inputs, or they might like the quarter circle forward, the dragon punch, the 360. They might like that, because it adds whole new levels of depth and just more excitement in general to the game, to any game. So, and you can't say that this is groundbreaking to have a easy mode as a baseline, because it was already done in Street Fighter Alpha 1 and in several fighting games before, where there were easy modes to simply bring people into the game. So with this control scheme that 2XKO is moving forward with, if they choose not to add a more classic control scheme system, they can count me out. I'll enjoy watching the tournament footage only for a little while, but I probably wouldn't watch it half as much as I would the Street Fighter 6 footage, or even Fatal Fury Call of the Wolves, because I know that those games, you have to know certain things about how the original fundamentals work to shine in those games. And I don't necessarily need a easy mode to let me choose how hard I want to study and work in order to get good at anything that I do. Playing a game, learning to make a recipe, anything. Let me choose my own difficulty based on what I already know and based on what has already existed and worked in the past. There, okay, I think I got that out, so I'm gonna go ahead and post this up now because I don't want to waste no time. They haven't even sent me the beta key, so like now's the perfect time to go ahead and send it to me, because maybe I can make a rebuttal video and be like, hey, you know what I said before about the control system? Maybe I didn't think hard enough, but I if I do that, then any of my subscribers, I give y'all permission to come and smack me in the face, because I really do enjoy the old school fundamental control scheme systems that have been established for decades and span so many fighting games and even other games outside of the genre that use that system. I think of Final Fight 3 as an example, a loose example, but anyways. Okay, Bob's Babbles and Blurbs. Thank you guys for listening. So subscribe and like as you please. All right, and until next time, hey, over and out.